Got a 6.0 POWERSTROKE that doesn't start, cranks over but will not start? Well, it's really common, and I'm going to show you how to diagnose and fix it. Nuts and bolts with Tone here, guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we have a 2006 Ford F-250 with a crank no start. I'm going to walk you through the process of how you can diagnose this, and we're going to look at the repairs along the way. Let's get started. As we get going, go ahead and hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, and if you ring that bell, you get notified of all my future content, which you definitely do not want to miss. It really helps the channel so I can continue to bring you these great videos. All right, so we're going to go into the vehicle, and we're going to scan it. And most of the time, you're going to have a code indicating ICP pressure too low, or ICP pressure too low while cranking. This one has an oil cooler code for a correlation between coolant temp and oil temp. Oh, there we go. All right, so it set the ICP too low, or oh no. Okay, so the 2285 is because I disconnected the ICP. When you have a 6-liter crank no start and you're not building high pressure oil, go disconnect your ICP sensor and see if it starts. If it starts, your ICP is bad or you have a connector problem. If it doesn't start, move on to what we're about to do. So there's the code, the 2291. So this code wasn't here before because this guy's been starting it with ether. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go in and we're gonna look at some PIDs here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to, you need to be able to scope data. I mean, if you can't scope data, you probably could just look at the number and see what it reaches to. The problem with scoping, without scoping data, is sometimes the number doesn't report where you actually are. So we're going to go down to ICP. So in this case, I already know that we FICM's good and all that. So we're going to go to graph. And we're going to go clear all triggers. All right, so we're going to go and we're going to look at, so if you don't know what you're supposed to see, you can look at that PID right there, that ICP desired. That's going to say that we need 500 pounds to start. There's the ICP pressure, and there's the IPR. You need 500 pounds of cranking oil pressure to start the vehicle. If you don't hit 500, this IPR will move up towards 85%, and it will go to 85% if you're not building enough high pressure oil. So we're going to try to start this thing. And the other thing that you want to do is you can look at your gauge on the dash while you're cranking it and make sure that your low pressure gauge reads while you're cranking it. If you don't have low pressure, you're not going to have high pressure. In this case, I already know we have low pressure, so we're going to crank it. 81, 254, 266. You can see the IPR is at 85%. We're not building over 278 pounds. So if you're not building 500 pounds of crank and oil pressure and your IPR goes to 85%, you have two problems. Either one, your IPR is not working. It's not actually closing off to deadhead the high pressure oil, because that's what it does. It closes it to deadhead the high pressure oil so you can start. Or we have a high pressure oil leak. So I'm going to show you how to test for a high pressure oil leak. We're going to energize the IPR and we're going to see what's going on. Now, if you don't know about a 6-liter POWERSTROKE, a 6-liter POWERSTROKE is a HUE oil system. So what that means is that you have a fuel pump that brings up 60-ish pounds of fuel to the engine, and 60 pounds is not going to get a diesel running. A diesel needs 500 pounds to get started. Then it needs way more than that to keep running, especially under load. So the way it works is you have a high pressure oil pump in the back, and that oil pump pumps oil down a branch tube that goes around like this, and it comes around that back of the heads. And then at the bottom, there's a hole. So from there, you have a standpipe that comes up and it goes into an oil rail. So you have an oil rail that's like this big. It's the same on both sides, it's just flip-flopped. So on the driver's side, the rear plug is a standpipe. It's about that long, goes down through the oil rail, about that long. It's got a hex up here, threads with an oil passage in the middle. It's a two-piece. And then down here you have an O-ring. This O-ring goes down inside of the branch tube. That comes up, threads into the head or into the oil rail, and then you have a oil passage that brings that oil up into that oil rail. Then that oil rail at the front, it has what's called a dummy plug. That dummy plug's about this long, and the reason there's a dummy plug is because that oil rail can go on either side. So they have to block off one of the ports. So then you have the dummy plug in the front, and then flip it around to the passenger side. You have a standpipe in the front, standpipe in the back, dummy plug in the front. So what that does is that pumps the 500 pounds of oil. You have an IPR on the oil pump that regulates the oil pressure. So the oil flows around 500 pounds of oil pressure. That IPR, if it needs to, it closes to deadhead the oil pressure. So in this, you saw that we were trying to have 500 pounds of oil pressure. You need 500 pounds. And what will happen is, if you're not building 500 pounds, then the IPR will start to close more and more and more. Eventually to 85%, deadheading that pump. And then from there, if it still doesn't start, it's not going to start. So then that IPR will constantly be regulating the oil pressure based on what it needs, because that oil pump is just a continuous pump. So that's how it makes 500 pounds of fuel pressure, essentially, but it's created with high pressure oil. So oil changes are super important in these. Oil quality is super important in these. Oil filters is super important in these trucks. So that's how this system works. All right, so first step is going to be getting the ICP, which is right there. It's in the front of the valve cover on the driver's side. You need to remove this sensor right here for testing. So you're going to disconnect it and remove the sensor. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this charge air pipe off. You don't need to. You can do it without taking it off, because this one's going to be getting an oil cooler when I'm all done, and I've already prepped them for pulling the valve covers. So I'm going to remove this, but you do not have to. It makes it easier because it's right down there. And what you'll need is you'll just need a hose with an air fitting attached to it and the fitting for the ICP. I'll put a link down below to a kit that has this fitting in it. It has several fittings. Then what I like to do is I put a air pressure gauge on there, because what happens is when you put 150 pounds of air into this thing, when you let off, it wants to shoot the oil back this way when you take the hose off. So what I do is I use the regulator here, since I have it for testing boost systems, and then I just bleed off the air pressure, and that way I don't have this giant gush of oil trying to go back this way. So once we have the ICP out, we're going to put the air hose in there. You want to have the oil cap off, and it's best to just do this so we can pinpoint which side it is, if possible. So you want to go ahead and just take your air box out. You're going to undo this hose clamp, the air filter minder connector, pull the sensor out, mass airflow off, pull your air box out, take this portion out. Then what you're going to do is, this is the fresh air, so this goes into the driver's valve cover. This goes into the passenger valve cover, so we can listen and try to pinpoint which side it is. I'm already going to be pulling both valve covers, but we're just learning how to test for this and how to pinpoint. Next thing you want to do is make sure that you have a scanner hooked up, and your FICM has to be hooked up. You're going to get your scanner pulled up, and you're going to go to ICP, injector control pressure duty cycle. And this is going to tell you that you can't leave it commanded for more than 120 seconds. So we're not going to command that yet. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over here, we're going to listen. So we're going to apply air. So we're all hooked up here. So you can start to hear all that oil pushing out. Now what we're going to do is, now we're going to go and command the IPR to 85%. And we should hear a change in the oil. no change. So we can hear it really, really loud right here. I don't know if it's picking that up or not. And if you come over here, you can't hear anything. So that means that our leak is on this side of the engine. Hopefully you can hear that. So the next step is to pull the valve covers. We're gonna go ahead and, it's light. We're gonna go ahead and pull the valve covers, and we're gonna do the same exact test. Now you need to remove your air test line that you have hooked up and go ahead and turn your key off. You're gonna be taking your FICM out and everything. And then we're gonna hook the line back up with the valve covers off, and we'll be able to see or hear the leak and hopefully even see it. So, all right, so we got the valve cover off. And now we're gonna check this. Now remember, we heard it on the driver's side and not the passenger side. So now as you can hear this leak. So this is the high pressure oil rail right here. So back there under the cover, you have a high pressure pump, and it pumps oil into a branch tube that comes around and around, and it stops right directly below this at an angle. This is a standpipe, a two-piece pipe, and it goes down into the bottom of that branch tube, and then it comes up into this oil rail. So the oil goes up the standpipe into this oil rail, it fills the oil rail, and it presses down and it pushes down on top of the injectors. So you have 4 injectors right down here. So the oil rails are the same on both sides. So since they're the same, you got to plug off one. So this is a dummy plug. So this is a dummy plug, and that's a standpipe. The standpipes are in the back. So I can't show you with the microphone, but the sound is coming from right below this right here, which would be the O-ring between the upper part of the standpipe and the lower part of the standpipe. So we'll take a look when we get this sold and get it pulled out. But this is gonna have a bad O-ring. Now I'm gonna do it on both sides, because if one side failed, the other side is not far along, not far behind. So luckily, I didn't hear anything. So if we didn't hear anything from this area and this area, then we would most likely hear it from right below this oil rail where it goes into the fuel injector. There's an O-ring in the top there. And that O-ring blows out and it leaks and can cause a no start as well. So I don't believe we have an O-ring leak on this side. So once we get this standpipe out, we'll take a look at it and see. Now we're going to replace the dummy plug and the standpipe on both sides, and then we'll retest it. So here's what the standpipe looks like. So this is the 2-piece right here. The bottom part's what goes down into the branch tube. And now right here, this is the top part. So you can see right there, that O-ring, that's what goes into the lower portion. And as you can see, that O-ring is blown out, and that's the cause of our no start. So on the passenger side, the bottom of the branch tube will stay in the head. It's right there. And you have to pull the oil rail off to get the bottom part of the branch tube out. Now to get it out, it can be kind of tricky. I have these pliers called VAM pliers. Those work really well just because of the way the jaws are. But if you just keep working it, you will eventually get it out. On the driver's side, though, if that lower portion of the standpipe comes out with the upper portion, then it's your lucky day, because you don't have to take you don't have to take the oil rail off. You can just slide it out. There's enough room to get the whole standpipe out, and then you can slide a new one in. So you're going to take the bottom portion of the standpipe and you're going to lube the O-ring. You're going to lube the O-ring. Then you're going to put it down in the hole. Make sure you get it in the branch tube. And then you want to try to get it in the center of the hole here, because when your oil rail goes on here, it's going to go inside there. And then the other half is going to thread up through there. And then this is the bottom of the dummy plug right here. So you can see the rail, it's the same both ways. It's just plugged off for different applications. Before you put your oil rail in, you want to go ahead and get a rag and some brake clean and go ahead and wipe around the perimeter of your rocker cover. So that way it's all clean, because once you put your oil rail in, you have less room. Now, these are the little ball tubes right here. There's a seal inside of there you can replace. You need a special socket. And then obviously you get the seals from Ford. So you can do that. Now, you want to lube up all those little nipples there, because those nipples slide down inside of your injectors. So you want to try to get them as straight as possible and get it to slide on so it doesn't tear the injector O-rings. Now, the bolts around the perimeter of your high pressure oil rail are T30s. So to get them out, you can use a regular socket, but for the last two on the bottom, this on the passenger side, the two lower ones by the HVAC case, those ones are really hard to get to. Now, you don't want to take a chance on dropping your bit down into your head. So I have this Mac Tools little bit socket or bit ratchet, and it has a locking flex head. So I put it at an angle like that. And now I have these Torx from Titan Tools. Now, the good thing about this combo is these things are the perfect length, and with the bit ratchet, they don't fall out. So they stay in. So that's the little Titan Tools set right there. Between that with that other ratchet, you can get those bolts out, no problem. And then when I put them back in, I don't torque them. I just snug them up because there's, I think, 8 around the perimeter, and they're just holding the oil rail down. You have the lower portion of the standpipe already in the head. Then you put your oil rail on. Now we have to put the upper part of the standpipe in. So you want to lube up the O-rings real good and slide it in. It's going to be a 12 millimeter Allen. Now I use the Carbine Tools sockets. They have a lifetime warranty, family run company based in the US, and they are awesome. So you're going to use those to torque down the standpipes and dummy plugs. Now, if you want to torque the oil rail, it's 10 foot-pounds, which I think is about 120 inch-pounds. And then the standpipes and dummy plugs are 60 foot-pounds. This seal right here, this sits on the high-pressure oil rail, and this goes between the oil rail and the valve cover. Make sure that doesn't get bumped off. So while I was recording this, I said that the last time I did one of these, it got bumped off. And then after I recorded this, that one slipped down while I was putting the valve cover on. So I'm going to torque down the standpipe in the back. I don't have the dummy plug right now because there's a big CDK hack right now. So the dealerships, they're not getting the work orders properly. They're not getting the parts out. And so we're suffering pretty bad. And this is at the beginning of the CDK hack. It got way worse after this video. So once you get those torqued, before you put the valve cover back on, we're going to go ahead and put our air fitting back on, and we're going to air check this one more time. And what we're listening for is big gushes of air. So you're going to hear a little bit of air leaking from the injectors where the O-ring meets, but it will be a very minor leak. You're listening for a big leak like we heard earlier. So finishing up this 6-liter, this one here, the customer came by to get some tools and told me that another big diesel shop had worked on it and that they were top notch. And, you know, I heard they were top notch, but like anywhere you get your vehicle worked on, it's who works on your vehicle, not where it's worked on. Because this one here, it was missing a bolt. Out of one of the 3 turbo bolts was missing. The clamp on the intercooler was stripped. There was just so many little things. About 4 or 5 valve cover bolts were stripped out, and I had to use a longer bolt. Just lots of little things that weren't done right. Anyways, it's done right now. So vacuuming it down now and waiting on an intercooler boot to get it running. So the boot that goes here was stripped out. So anyways, it's got to connect the batteries and put that the hot side intercooler pipe on, and that's it. And this one will be a runner. All right, got the 6-liter running here. I'm still waiting on the clamp right here, so I can't drive it, but at least letting it run. I did an oil cooler, so and standpipes and everything, so it's gonna have to be bled. So now I got this running. This was on my big lift, my big truck lift. So I'll move it over here, let it run until I get my clamp. Now, after you get this thing all back together and you go to start it, you want to make sure that your batteries are fully charged, or you put a couple of really good jump packs on there. You don't want to crank it over for more than 10 seconds at a time because, believe it or not, you will melt your starter. Crank it over, let it sit for a couple seconds, go cranking again. Now, it will take quite a bit of time, quite a bit of cranking for this thing to start. So don't lose hope, but just keep going, and eventually it'll start. After watching this video, you should feel pretty confident going there to test it. However, you also could have a top injector O-ring leak. You could have an STC fitting at the back of your pump. You could have a failed high pressure pump. However, the most common cause of this crank no start is standpipes and dummy plugs. And then the next would be injector top O-rings. So thanks for watching the video. Drop a comment down below and let me know if you have a 6-liter and you figured this out on your own, or if you're a technician and you're familiar with this process. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.